I'm about to dig into the 5 different scenarios that I think could be happening here that lead me to think that the C8 probably isn't coming. I'm going to rank them from least likely to most likely. I think that they're all actually in the realm of possibility. What's going on, guys? Big Clive 34 coming at you today. The fact that we have all this news about the 2020 C8 mid-engine Corvette, when it came out, how it came out, the information that we have, all of that together just does not feel like a new car release. I was in the shower late last night and I was like thinking through all these facts and I was like, damn, I have to make a video on this. And before you know it, we have a picture that shows that a 2020 mid-engine C8 Corvette really doesn't look likely. One day somebody just decided, hey, this thing's gonna come out in 2020, and then all of a sudden that's like a thing. Nobody from GM has literally said pretty much anything. We don't really have any news on this at all. We have some small leaks, like the fact that the platform had an electrical issue that they had to solve, and this, I guess, is supposed to be a Corvette. I mean, other than that, nothing is confirmed, nothing is real. It's 100% speculation. I hope that if you enjoy this video that I think might actually break the internet, that you leave a thumbs up and subscribe down below for more. What eventually really set off that first domino that made me want to make this video was an article that I was writing the other day for Speed Society. And basically what's happening is there are thousands upon thousands of new Corvettes sitting on lots. I think the figure was about 9,000, and they're waiting to be sold. And meanwhile, all these rumors are generating in the rumor mill of a new car coming, so they're just kind of chilling there. Normally, what will happen when a car gets older, like mid-generation or late generation, there will be like a commemorative edition. The ones that I have here are the 50th anniversary, and the C5 came out. The commemorative edition C5 came out the last year of production. Then in your C6 you have like the carbon edition, the centennial edition, and the 427/60th anniversary edition. And these are kind of just like very small cosmetic upgrades. They're special packages. They're not necessarily worth a ton of money. They're just kind of maybe cool cars to own. I think the carbon editions were actually pretty cool, but usually a dealer will, or a manufacturer will do that when they're getting ready to start moving toward the next generation, just to help get these old cars off the lot. Whether it be for someone to come in and go, hey, I want to buy the carbon edition because that thing just absolutely spoke to me, or come in to look at the carbon edition and then end up buying some of the base model cars and just get cars moving in that way so they can get toward the next generation. They'll also offer like incentives through financing or a couple $1,000s off or something like that. And GM has done none of this. So that, I feel, is actually pretty weird if they're going to be releasing a new car, but they've been doing nothing to get these, 2019s off of the lot as they sit. Second, we have the fact that the C7, which is a pretty good platform in terms of Corvettes. The C7's had, I think, overheating issues for a little bit. They got that sorted out. It seems to be a really solid platform. It's only been out for 6 years. Now, when I was doing the research here, I didn't really go back too far. Like, I mean, the C2 only stayed in rotation for 5 years, but that's from the 60s. I tried to focus on the C4 as the oldest, and the C5 and C6, and I mean the C7 obviously. The C5 is the shortest Corvette in recent memory in terms of a generational lifespan. It lasted 8 years, so the C7 is 2 years younger than that right now, and then the C6 lasted 9 years. 6 years seems like an awfully short period of time, but they did the whole new architecture thing. They jumped to the LT engine. It's supercharged in the Z06 and obviously ZR1, so they're tinkering with some new things there. It just kind of struck me as kind of weird that they would just cut off a generation after 6 years. Perhaps one of the most telltale signs, at least for me, they had released that alleged interior shot of the 2020 C8 Corvette. Now, it is a little bit upgraded. It is different than what we know now, but it's not like super different to the extent that we have seen each of these cars take a jump. So I feel like in the Corvette realm, the C4 to the C5 interior, massive jump. C5 was still pretty shitty. I dealt with one of those cars for a couple months before I hit the deer with it. C5 to C6. C6 wasn't great, but compared to the C5, it was basically like, you know, LeBron James playing a high school kid in basketball. And then C5 or C6 to C7 really brought the Corvette into the modern age. If you take a look, I'm gonna just pull this up here real quick. What really threw me off was that the center console does look to be very similar. So the way that the lid for the center console is, the opening for the cup holders, and the knob up there that I guess it's to change in between modes, and then I believe, it's hard to tell from this leaked photo, but it looks like you have the electric emergency brake there as well, along with like the screen orientation and everything. This does look like an upgraded C7 interior, but it does not look like every other generational jump with the Corvette where they completely overhauled the entire thing. The one thing also that I noticed is the idea that the flags on the steering wheel are very similar to the flags that we have now. So again, starting at the C4, the first 3 generations were all pretty similar. So I mean, this could be just a conspiracy theory for all I know. I'm just laughing because I looked over there off camera, and I actually have a red light ticket that I never paid for my C5 when I had that hanging on a bulletin board, and I forgot I had that, but hey, that's neither here nor there. The flags with every generation change. C4 to C5, drastic change. C5 to C6, drastic change. C6 to C7, definitely. It's almost like they took the logo and changed up a little bit and italicized it, if you can italicize a logo. And then the difference between the C7 and this alleged C8 interior is that they just kind of like took the logo and pushed it together a little bit. You could call me crazy. It could be picking apart a minor detail. I mean, it technically still did change, so that could be going against what I'm trying to say here, but it just struck me as kind of weird that it wasn't a major change. I'm about to dig into the 5 different scenarios that I think could be happening here that lead me to think that the C8 probably isn't coming. I'm going to rank them from least likely to most likely. I think that they're all actually in the realm of possibility. So like I was saying, we know just about nothing factually outside of what we've seen with these test mules. We know just about nothing about this car. The first theory is that this isn't even a Corvette at all. They've been screwing with us. The actual interior shots that we have that go along with the car seem to not really show anything, or like the door handles and that kind of stuff don't line up with the other interior shot that we saw. So therefore, that might lead one to think that this interior is for the next generation or next year of Corvette, not the next generation, the next model year, and they're just doing a mid-phase upgrade to the interior like they always do. I mean, look at the difference between a 2006 C6 Z06 and a 2012 or 13 C6 Z06. They're pretty different. They're the same, but pretty different. I think that's what I could say about this interior, the teaser shot that we have. It's like a C7, it's the same, but very different. If that makes any sense. That could lead me to think that there's a new model coming out. The Corvette is Chevy's baby. Like, that is their baby. Like, do not touch it. Do not make another car that makes more horsepower than it. We've seen it, like, back in the day, LS1 Camaros and LS1 Corvettes had the same exact engine, but they were both rated at different horsepower numbers because Chevy was like, yo, the Corvette is our shit, don't touch it. If something isn't broke, don't fix it. Really comes into play here. The Corvette is one of those cars that Chevy doesn't really need to do this with, go mid-engine with. They could stay where they're at and still be perfectly fine if they just keep in the lineage. People seem to always love these things when they come out. Knock on wood, they haven't screwed it up yet, so why would they go mid-engine? That could lead somebody to think that this is an entirely new model that's not going to be a Corvette. But saying, you know, that the Corvette is GM's baby kind of plays against that, because I don't know if they would ever come out with something that's above the Corvette. Maybe they decided it's time, though. Maybe they decided the Corvette's been out for a really long time. Let's just go ahead and introduce something new. Theory number 2, this could just be a future model year car. It could be the C8 that we're seeing testing out there, but nobody said anything about 2020. The mule dates do line up. The difference between, you know, C7 mule being spotted and C7 coming out would indicate that when C8 mule is spotted, C8 mule should be coming out for a 2020 model year. However, maybe they need just a touch bit longer because they're completely doing this thing from scratch scratch. Now, every Corvette is different from the last in almost every way. I don't think they recycle too much between generations, but taking a car and flipping it on its head, literally reworking the entire architecture, is a big undertaking. So they might just need more time to get that done. This would really explain the lack of a push to get these cars off of dealership lots, the short C7 generational lifespan. I feel like they could really milk the C7 for a couple more years, come out with a couple more special editions, really make that work, and it just doesn't make sense that they're not doing that. The fact that we have no actual reveal yet, and it's going into, you know, toward the last couple of car shows or auto shows of the year, leads me to wonder there. There is rumors that Chevrolet is going to release this thing on their own accord, have an event around it. I mean, this is big news. If the Corvette goes mid-engine, they could do that, so that could be a reality as well. We could have the C8 this year. This is point number 3 out of 5. So getting more and more likely, I think that this one, they're gonna have the C8 run alongside the C7, which is the speculation. That seems to be a very widely accepted answer as I go around the web. It just seems to me like they'll cannibalize their own sales. I can't think of, off the top of my head, any time where a manufacturer goes, okay, we're going to continue to sell the old one and also sell the new one, which appears to be what people are thinking they might do here. I don't really have much to say about that. And getting on to the top 2 theories that nobody's really approached, but I think make for an interesting argument. Perhaps they are changing to a mid-engine configuration, but why are we jumping to the conclusion that it's a new generation? Why can't it be a phase 2 of the C7? So they kind of did this back in the day with the F-body. So the 4th generation of Camaro and Firebird started off as an LT1 car and would be revolutionized in some of the first cars. I think the first car that the LS came out in was actually the Corvette in '97, but you get my point. In '98, they came out with the LS engine and completely overhauled, I mean, a lot of it was the same, but they overhauled a lot of the F-body, and it was essentially like, hey, we're giving it a facelift, it's gonna have a brand new engine architecture. It would make sense that maybe they would switch the architecture of the drivetrain in the middle of a generation here. It could happen. I've seen crazier happen, and maybe they still want to take advantage of some of the technology that's in the C7, whether it be related to the powertrain or not. Maybe some of the electronics, the interior, like it hasn't lived out its life cycle yet. Maybe they're figuring, okay, this is going to cost us a ton of money. Let's toss it in a car with some C7 components and just have a phase redesign. And that way they can kind of roll this thing out in a softer way to take advantage of some of the styling of the C7 without spending even more money, because I assume this is going to be an engineering financial nightmare from that standpoint. The similar interior is really the biggest point that leads me to think that, just because I feel like the jump in interior has to be a lot bigger than this picture that we're seeing if the next model year of Corvette is going to be a new generation. It's just way too similar if you ask me. I don't think it's enough of a change to really be a new generation. I could be wrong. And I think this one might be the craziest. You might think I'm like off my rocker here, but I think this might be the most likely thing that you're seeing out there with this new Corvette. In order to keep the big purist Corvette fans happy, who would probably be rather upset if they completely reconfigured the Corvette from like an American muscle machine into a supercar, even though it's kind of already bordering in that territory. I think that they might introduce the mid-engined platform as a new trim level. Hear me out here for a second, guys. It takes a really, I don't think many of us have considered this, but it takes a really big and bold move to go from something that has been working for generations and is honestly one of the best performing, affordable, like real life supercars that an average person can save up their money and afford, and take it and completely flip it on its head is just kind of like a big, bold move. What is the safe middle ground here? Well, this would line up with the fact that it's still a C7 and the interior kind of still looks like a C7 to me. They could have their base model, Grand Sport, Z06, ZR1, and then whatever this model's called up here, that is the mid-engine all-wheel drive model. It would be a pretty different architecture than the current Corvette, but it would give them the opportunity to kind of roll this out, like I was saying before, with the potential phase 2 plan. So it'll be a little bit cheaper, it'll still be a C7, and it'll kind of let them test this out. If the car ends up having major issues, they can essentially blow it off the face of the earth and act like none of that ever existed and go right back to making Corvettes as they were for the 8th generation of car. I think that would be a pretty smart move to not fully commit to something that is changing the face of a car that has been the face of your brand since the 50s. That would be a very intelligent move, and one that would make all too much sense. Underneath, having the Corvette as it is gives them an easier chance to push the reset button if things go wrong. This is where they also grab onto the fact that, hey, I'm going to take an assumption here. Some of the things that I read say, you know, if they come out with this mid-engine platform, it's probably going to be a lot more expensive. And people might be like, well, more expensive, they could sell more expensive cars then. They're just gonna make just as much money. Well, that's not necessarily true. One of the biggest successes in all of performance automobiles is the Ford Mustang. It always sells a ton of vehicles, it always makes Ford a ton of money. It's not the greatest car on earth. I have a lot of respect for Mustangs, even though pretty much, well, everything in my driveway is a GM product. I have a lot of respect for Mustangs. They pack a lot of value per dollar in performance. And that's why they do so great, because they realize their target market isn't going to be spending $80,000, $90,000 on a car most of the time. So they have these options up top, like the GT500, that allows people to go out and say, okay, I'm gonna spend all of my money on this car because I like this package and what have you. But there's still the option to get that 30, 40, I don't know what Mustangs cost these days, so don't yell at me for getting this number wrong because I didn't research it. 30, 40, mid-40s, I would probably assume that a nice Mustang costs these days, which is affordable to finance for a lot of people. GM, by jumping up to the high end of the spectrum here on the expensive mid-engine platform, might be shutting out half their market. But by keeping these C7s and potentially having both options for the C8 when it eventually comes out, being mid-engined and the traditional setup, they still have these cars down here that people can afford. It's not going to be, you know, the supercar that, you know, 10% of current Corvette owners would be able to afford. Here's my bold but unfounded claim. There's actually absolutely no research to back this one up, but I'm just going to put this in here so if this happens, I can go, yeah, I called it. I think that potentially they're going to drop the Grand Sport and they are going to go and replace the Grand Sport with this model, leaving, you know, the coupe or base model, whatever you want to call it, at the low end of the spectrum, and then having the Z06, ZR1, and whatever this one's going to be. Only because, the only reason I say that is because just from anecdotal evidence. Driving around, I'll see Z06s every now and then, I'll see a lot of coupes, and every once in a blue moon, I'll see a ZR1. Even though the Grand Sport's not that expensive, I hardly ever see Grand Sports, and I feel like even though they're a car with a lot of potential, I don't think that that potential is maximized. I don't think they sell a ton of them. I couldn't really find much evidence on how many Grand Sports sell. Maybe you guys can comment below with some of that, but that's what I think. So with that said, if there's a higher trim of Corvette than a ZR1 and it's all-wheel drive, mid-engined, and is as awesome as I hope it will be, I might have to sign up for one. I don't want to say that out loud because then people are going to hold me to it, but I'm very interested. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think. Is this like a conspiracy theory? Do you think I'm on the right track? Leave a comment below. This has been Big Clyde 34. I'm still currently actively dying. I don't know if you could tell that with my voice throughout the video, but yeah, that being said.